Hi, this is Mark Andrews with Pega, and welcome to the Way Forward in Financial Services. Today, I have with me Scott Andrick, who ran part of the call center operations at Fifth Third and was then responsible for the back office operations at one of the top 10 credit card issuers before joining Pega. Welcome to our show, Scott.
Good morning. Coffee time, right?
Yeah, well, appreciate you spending the time with us today. One of the things we wanted to talk about in today's session was about the need for banks to reduce the overall manual workload that they're facing. During the crisis, as banks started dealing with increased workloads in certain areas, they had to throw bodies at the problems. But now they're faced with this increasing expense and trying to figure out how to reduce all the manual activities that they're needing to throw people at. Isn't this something banks have been trying to do for a while?
Yeah, actually, my entire career, I've been trying to solve this problem. If I go back to my contact center and back office days, we were always looking for ways to improve overall efficiency. And it's still there. And the crisis really highlighted it with that comment that you made about throwing bodies at it. There's still too many manual decisions, too many handoffs, too many tasks being done by people manually. And that cost piece is going to be there, but the reason they're going to focus on this is with fee revenue dropping and delinquencies going, they got to figure out which levers they can pull to actually get to the balance sheet. We've seen this in surveys that we've done at Pega, where up to 1,100 times a day, you can have people switching between applications. And it has an impact on the way you service your customer, because in other surveys Pega has done, 80% of the people are looking for faster service. You come out of COVID, it's already slow, but even before that, people wanted faster service. So yes, we've got to attack this manual residual problem that we have in banks.
So how do banks go about addressing that? Wasn't there a lot of talk about using things like robotics to cut out all of that back and forth between different systems?
It was. That's certainly been the hot topic for the past couple of years, and robotics is part of the answer. RPA, robotic process automation, is very good for automating discrete tasks, especially when you have to integrate with another system. That's really at its core what it's good at. Pega has a robotic capability as part of it. We do that. We help people for things like Start My Day and a consolidated view of a customer and auto notes at the end of a call, say as an example. And those are great ways to reduce some manual effort in terms of overall time that people spend on things. But you need more than that. You need to look at case management and business rules, especially when you're talking about long-running processes, things that aren't done right when you're on the phone call or right with that first interaction, that requires multiple people in the back office to actually do that work. Because those are the elements where you're ultimately looking to maybe get some straight through processing aspects going in. And the RPA isn't necessarily going to be able to do that all as that discrete one hit piece. Now, the other piece that you got going on, we saw in the crisis, is this, hey, let's throw a form up on the website to kind of offload the traffic that we can't handle in the contact center. And that's good, but see, if that's not connected in with the rest of what's going on in your operation, then now you've got this huge manual effort to try and take all that in and then get it through the rest of the factory that you're going on. You really need something like that case and rules aspect to have guided processing, both for your customers and for employees, to help them get through this entire crisis that we've been through. Because you may be looking at people, customers have never done this before, but you may have thrown employees at something that they've never done before, and they're going to need help and guidance to get through that.
So what's the ultimate objective here? What is it that the banks are trying to accomplish as they reduce the manual workload? Obviously, that's a means to an end. What is the end goal here?
I think that, we talk about this sometimes as almost a last mile problem. There's a lot of automation that's gone in, but if you really looked at it from an end-to-end perspective, and I think the holy grail here, I mentioned it, before, straight through processing, it's that ability to actually get that request in and have all of the automation take it completely to the end. You're not going to be able to STP everything. It's a lofty goal, it's a good goal, but you're not going to be able to STP everything. But you want to shift looking at your work to say, does the human touch point add value? And you should be attacking all of the human touch points and decisions from a value add perspective. So that you're getting that efficiency, but on top of that, you get extra benefits. So you're going to get that efficiency gain, but you're also going to get better quality because you're not going to be rekeying things amongst multiple systems. You're going to get better SLA achievement for your overall process because you're not going to have all of these artificial breaks along the way as you're passing off to different people. So at the end of the day, those kinds of things not only help the bank, but they also drive better CSAT or NPS scores. So you've got happier customers that want to do more business with you. Side benefit that a lot of people don't think about when you take this case management and rules approach is compliance and auditability. If you look at the way Pega does case management and how we track what's going on, we know who, what, when, where, how, everything. We're time stamping it. We know what's going on. If you've got your codified business processes in there, you can demonstrate even to external auditors why you made a certain decision and what steps were followed to do that. So that's always
that's a great point. And I love that added benefit you just highlighted. When you automate some of the activities, you're capturing what's been done and by who, and you're able to track it. And I imagine even provide greater transparency across the organization and to the customers about where things are in the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, the last thing I'm curious to hear from you is, have you seen any banks that have been able to start doing this yet, and any specific types of results that you can talk about that you've seen them accomplish?
Yeah, we're working with banks around the globe, and if you think about the couple different categories I talked about, RPA, robotic process automation, we're seeing some great results. We've got a bank that's in the disputes and fraud area, has seen between 30 and 60% gains based upon the individual tasks that are being performed. That's a great place to start. You kind of take that up the next notch and you look at something like email bots, where you've got inbound either commercial traffic, or this is National Australia Bank out of Australia. They were doing this for the mortgage process as well, because there were certain points where you had to transfer documents back and forth. They had the ability to appropriately triage 75% of those items coming in. So you don't have a human trying to figure out, well, where do I send this work? It just ends up at the right place. But again, back to that STP, or straight through processing goal, we have a top 20 bank that's doing exceptions processing in the payments arena. And they've been able to achieve 78% straight through processing rates. And even in the areas where they weren't able to straight through process that exception, they've been able to reduce the manual touch points over time by 70%. So that really kind of gives you the target to shoot for in terms of what do we think we can do with this if you're focusing on adding value only for those manual steps.
Well, that's really impressive. And hopefully that provides some of you with other ideas of how you can get started on reducing your manual workload and cutting out the costs across your organization while at the same time streamlining customer service. So thank you very much for joining our show today, Scott, and I hope everyone is staying safe out there. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mark.